I just finished watching Netflix's Shipwrecked, Nightmare at Sea, the documentary about the Costa Concordia disaster, and honestly, I wasn't expecting it to hit me as hard as it did. This is the Leverton Review, where I watch and review everything on everything I can on my quest to becoming the most prolific reviewer of all time. I remember hearing about the accident back in 2012. At the time, it almost felt like people treated it as a bizarre news story or even a joke. Maybe it was because the images of this enormous cruise ship lying on its side looked so surreal. But after watching this documentary, it's impossible to see it that way. 32 people lost their lives, dozens more were injured, and thousands of passengers endured one of the most terrifying nights imaginable. This isn't just a story about a shipwreck, it's a story about leadership, panic, courage, and the consequences of terrible decisions. So, what happened? For anyone unfamiliar with the disaster, the Costa Concordia struck rocks just off the Italian island of Giglio after Captain Francisco Schettino deliberately steered the ship close to shore during a maneuver known as a salute, a close pass intended to honor people on the island. The impact tore a massive hole in the hull, flooding the engine rooms and leaving the ship without critical systems. Within hours, the vessel rolled onto its side. What struck me while watching the documentary is that it seems to bend over backwards to suggest the disaster wasn't entirely the captain's fault. It talks about misunderstandings between Schettino and the helmsman, including language issues that may have affected how steering commands were carried out. But honestly, even if those communication problems existed, they don't change the fact that the captain made the decision to bring a 1,114,000 ton cruise ship dangerously close to shore in the first place. Without that decision, none of the rest happens. So let's talk about the leadership failure. The documentary also shows something that to me is even more disturbing than the collision itself. After the ship hit the rocks, there was a long delay before passengers were told the truth. People had already felt the impact. They knew something was wrong. Many had gathered at the lifeboat stations exactly as they were supposed to, but the crew hesitated. Instead of declaring an emergency immediately, passengers were repeatedly reassured that there was only an electrical problem. Those lost minutes mattered. This wasn't just one bad decision, it became a chain of failures. And you know that saying, the captain goes down with his ship? Well, the captain left his ship in this case. One of the most infamous moments in the disaster is also included in the documentary. Captain Schettino eventually left the ship while hundreds of passengers were still on board. The documentary features the now famous exchange between him and the Italian Coast Guard. The Coast Guard officer repeatedly orders him to return to the vessel and coordinate the evacuation. His tone of condescension shows how unbelievable he thinks this situation is. It's one of those recordings that's almost impossible to believe is real. But let's talk about the human stories connected to this tragedy. Where this documentary truly succeeds is in the survivor interviews. Instead of focusing only on investigations and technical failures, it spends a lot of time with ordinary people who lived through the nightmare. And those stories are heartbreaking. Let's talk about the family with the baby. One story follows a young family traveling with their infant daughter. They're getting ready for bed when they hear the scraping sound of the ship running aground. From that moment, everything becomes chaos. The lights go out, people are screaming, the family becomes separated in the darkness. The father tells his wife to hold on to his pants no matter what while he carries their baby. Eventually, they climb on board a lifeboat, only to discover that it can't safely be launched because of the ship's severe angle. They have to climb back onto the cruise ship itself, which is now a dangerous climb high above the sea. At one point, crew members tell them that the safest escape route is now on what used to be the other side of the ship, but is now the bottom of the ship. Because the Costa Concordia has rolled over, hallways have become vertical shafts. The family literally has to slide down the interior of the ship while furniture crashes around them. The father later describes holding onto his baby as they slid downward, terrified she had been seriously injured after striking part of the ship. He says in a heartbroken voice to his wife, she hit her head hard. That entire sequence is almost unbearable to watch. Thankfully, their daughter survived and is doing well today. Then there's another kind of tragedy that's mentioned in this documentary. Another story affected me even more. A woman chose the cruise to celebrate her 50th birthday. She's traveling with her teenage daughter, her daughter's boyfriend, and a close friend. The four of them make it all the way to the lifeboat area. They're almost safe. But then the mother's friend realizes she doesn't have a life jacket. And the mother's wearing high-heeled shoes, and she's incredibly uncomfortable. So the mother also wants to return to the cabin to change out of her high heels and retrieve a few things. Her daughter, 17 years old, begs her not to go. She goes anyway. She never comes back. The daughter says something like, "I started looking for my mother that night. I didn't find her until 2 years later." The mother's body wasn't recovered until almost 2 years after that night. That interview completely broke me. It's such a painfully human mistake. She probably thought she had time. Most people probably would have believed they had time. But disasters don't give you time. But let's talk about how ordinary people can be extraordinary. One thing the documentary does exceptionally well is to show how ordinary people respond under extraordinary circumstances. Some passengers panic, some freeze, others become incredibly brave. The father carrying his baby despite his fear of heights over the ocean and a huge plummet. Crew members who ignored the confusion and focused on saving lives. Rescue teams who worked through the night despite the dangerous conditions. Those are the moments that stay with you long after the documentary ends. Let's talk about the question of responsibility. The documentary also interviews members of the crew, including people who later accepted legal responsibility for aspects of what happened. Some admit that they should have spoken up sooner. Others acknowledged they failed to challenge dangerous decisions or delayed emergency procedures. That's something I appreciated. It reminds us that disasters are rarely caused by one mistake alone. They're usually the result of many failures happening one after another. Still, I don't think the documentary fully escapes one uncomfortable reality. Everything begins with the captain's decision to deviate from the planned route. Without that choice, the Costa Concordia almost certainly never strikes the rocks. So here are my final thoughts. Shipwrecked, Nightmare at Sea is one of the most emotional documentaries I've seen in a long time. It's tense. It's heartbreaking. And it's a powerful reminder that behind every headline are real people whose lives are changed forever. This wasn't another Titanic. The loss of life was thankfully far smaller. But that's only because passengers, rescuers, and many members of the crew showed incredible courage despite a catastrophic failure of leadership. By the end, I wasn't thinking about the ship, I was thinking about the families. The parents trying to protect their children. The daughter who lost her mother because of one terrible decision. The people who trusted those in charge and paid the price when that trust was broken. Here's my rating for this documentary. I'm giving Shipwrecked, Nightmare at Sea a 9 out of 10. It's gripping, emotional, and very well made. If you're interested in true stories, maritime disasters, or documentaries that focus on the human side of tragedy, it's absolutely worth watching. Just be prepared. It might leave you in tears. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more movie and documentary reviews. And let me know in the comments, what's the most powerful documentary you've ever seen?